Hello! Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. It's lovely to not see you, but it's lovely for you to be here. Can somebody let me know if you can hear me and see me? Although hear me is more important. If you are logged into your YouTube account, you can leave a comment, ask questions, say hello in the chat box, which is probably on the right hand side of your screen, I hope. Please do feel free to ask questions. I'll try and answer them. If you're not logged into YouTube and you do have a question, email me, message me on social media, stop me in the street, and I will try and answer them. Thank you so much for joining me for this, the launch of my second collection of short stories. It is called The Second Time, and many of you won't have seen the cover because I haven't done an official cover reveal yet. So this copy in here is actually my mum and dad's copy. I'll give it to you tomorrow. And so here we go. The cover looks like this. I actually love it. It's called The Second Time, Contemporary Short Stories. And you can see, I think that's the intro written by hand, because I always write by hand. That is literally the laptop that I'm streaming to you on. And there is the inevitable cup of coffee. The book, this book, is dedicated to my friend Anne. She's been my friend for 40 years. We met when we started high school. When I told her that this book was dedicated to her, it was probably the first time I've ever found her speechless. So because it's dedicated to her, I asked her to suggest a story I might read here at the launch. She chose 3, because that's Anne for you. I'm actually going to read 2 of them. 2 of them that she chose, and one of the ones that is my favourite. So this is the one that Anne said, if she had to pick one, this would be it. It's called Virus. Slow down. I struggle to get the message at first. It's not that I hear it, it's more that I don't listen, and I don't think about the words. The reality is that I'm so plugged into the world that I'm used to being bombarded by stuff all the time, so it takes my brain a little while to process an alien message. Slow down. I take all the social media hysteria off my phone. It helps. I snooze a lot of email communications, people reaching out to me desperately trying to keep things normal. I decide that normal is exactly the thing I'd like to get away from for a while. The idea of being able to stop habits that in normal life seem unbreakable is appealing. The idea of finding time for those projects that I never get around to, even more so. The routine I create for myself is based on having the time, not needing to rush, being in control of my little world, of my bit of physical space. Slow down. And by slowing down, I feel better. I get more done. I switch off my alarm clock, and guess what? I wake up at the same time every day. But instead of being jolted awake by depressing news stories, I take my time to come to. I get up, make coffee, and take some quiet time to contemplate the day ahead. I'm eating more slowly too. I take time to prepare the food I enjoy, and then I linger over my meals, no shoving down a snack on the go. My house is sparkling because I have the time to give it a proper clean, not the quick zip through normal life allows for. I even pull furniture out and clean behind it. I wash the windows. I attack my garden with vigour. Jobs that I've left undone for ages because they seem too big to contemplate are now completed in a matter of hours. No amount of weeding is too much. Thank the gods that the weather is good and that I have a garden to escape to. Slow down. Only in some ways I don't. I no longer have an excuse not to go jogging, so I go. I challenge myself to run 2.5k without stopping, and I smash it at the first attempt. And I drag out my yoga mat and start practicing that too. And what with the jogging and the yoga and the cleaning and the gardening, after 3 days I struggle to move a muscle. But I'm sleeping better, and I feel great. My job is in stasis at the moment, wrapped in cling film mostly, because this new normal has no place for restaurants. I miss my workmates and our regular customers, but the lack of going out to work gives me more time to put pen to paper and write. I wrote a book a few months ago. It was, and still is, dreadful. It was the product of doing something without giving it the proper time. It will, I'm pleased to say, never see the light of day. I'm going to take the time to shred it. I'm planning my next book now, and that's the key word, planning. I'm making sure I have all the research done, the plot in place, the characters mapped out before I start. I'm giving the book the time it deserves to be the best it can be. I don't have time, which so often means I don't want to. Well, now I do have the time, and it turns out there are still things I don't want to do. So I'm stopping feeling guilty about those things, because there are too often the things I think I ought to be doing to please someone else. I certainly don't have time to be wasting on pleasing other people. You never get any thanks for it. Slow down. So that was Virus, which was, like a couple of these stories written during the pandemic, all the stories in this book have been written in the last year, 18 months. So there are a few virus stories, but hopefully not too many. The blurb says it's a wonderful collection of men and women going about their lives in strange times. Murder, mayhem, meditation, but no vampires. Not this time. Paul, if you made it, and if you're watching, you want vampire stories, this is my first collection of stories. There are 3 vampire stories in that one. So that's the one you want, if you want vampires. The next story I'm going to read is, I think, my favourite of all the stories. It's called Capture. He moves, jerkily at first, awkwardly even, trying to give her what she wants, but never quite delivering. She sits quietly, watching, waiting. She will know what she wants when she sees it, but it has not yet come. He relaxes as time goes on, realises that she will not direct him, realises that she's waiting for him to settle into it and find his own way. He's intrigued that she trusts him to find his own way, trusts him to discover his own path. It gives him the courage to try new things and experiment with his form. She watches, fascinated by the process he's going through, delighting in the shapes he's making, even if they're not quite right yet. She senses him getting closer to what she's looking for. She can see his eyes closing, see his mind clearing as he responds to the music playing softly in the background. As he curls up, she stretches in her chair and then sits forward, eager to see what he will come up with next, how the music will move him next. Her fingers twitch. She thinks about changing the track, but instinct tells her that that will be the wrong move. She needs to trust his reactions to the carefully chosen playlist. And she has chosen carefully. She's an old hand at this. She knows it can take a while to get the mood right. And so she watches. She sips the glass of champagne, an affectation her teacher had that she adopted. She doesn't like champagne. It's merely a habit, part of the way she works now. She'd never choose to drink it socially, but she considers it part of her working toolkit. Yes, he's almost ready. She can see him beginning to form the shapes she imagined when she was planning this. She begins to hum quietly, her voice low and deep. He reacts by creating more interesting shapes, his hands playing softly around his body. She reaches out, carefully, quietly. She knows she mustn't break into his thoughts. He has forgotten that she is even in the room. He has forgotten that he is even in the room. He's somewhere in his imagination, flying free and exploring a new world. His eyes are closed. His mouth opens slightly. He licks his lips. Maybe he can smell the champagne she's drinking. There's none for him. Not yet. Not until he delivers what she's after. Almost. Almost. The anticipation is becoming too much for her. He's so close. And there it is. She pushes the shutter again and again. She hears the camera click and is bathed in the light of the flashbulb. And she has it, the perfect image. She has managed to capture that perfect moment of delight, and her work is done. So that is the story called Capture. Most of what I write is quite short. I write a lot of flash fiction. Quite a lot of the stories in the second time are only a couple of pages. But if you want something a bit longer, this is literally the longest thing I've ever written. It's about 27,500 words, and it's a historical novella. It's called Phantoms, the Sacrist's Tale, and it tells the story of the foundation of Fountains Abbey in North Yorkshire. It, like all my books, is available from Lulu, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Google it, you'll find it. If you've got any questions and you want to pop them in the box, do. I will try and answer them. Adrian asked me a question that he wanted me to answer here, and it was about what I'm doing next. What am I doing next? In terms of writing lots of new stories and poems, because one of the problems when you publish and also when you sort of do open mics and poetry performances is that you've always got to have new work. If you've published work, you often can't enter it for competitions. And, you know, all of my best stories have gone into this. So writing new work. The other thing that I'm doing that's upcoming is the Art on the Hill Festival here in Newport is happening between the 27th and 29th of this month. It usually happens around the centre of town and up Stow Hill and around there. This year, for obvious reasons, it's mostly happening online. And I will have a very short, it's about 3.5 minutes long, film premiering on YouTube as part of that festival, featuring 4 new poems. What it doesn't feature is me sitting reading, you'll be glad to know. It is something a little bit different. So, I'm going to do one last story from the book. There are 20, so you haven't heard anywhere near the full collection. This story is called Ghost Story, and a friend asked me to write it to perform at an event that she was holding in her house. She lives in Cardiff, in Roath, and behind the houses there are alleys. So this story is set in the alley behind her house. And it's called Ghost Story. It was all she had known for as long as this version of herself had known anything. She had no recollection of how she'd got to this place, and she'd long ago discovered that whatever she did, she could not get out. She knew there were other places beyond this place. She could see them, and hear them, and taste them. She guessed if she could taste, she could probably smell too, but she couldn't touch. She could never seem to quite grasp anything. She felt invisible. She didn't know why, but people always seemed to stare right through her. She found it incredibly rude, but her naturally reserved nature made it impossible for her to ask anyone she encountered why they never had any kind words for her. She was alone in the darkness. She was alone in the daytime too, but being alone in the darkness was worse. It was an intense loneliness, sadness magnified almost to the point where it couldn't be borne. But it never quite tipped over the edge. And there was something missing, a question on the tip of her tongue that she could never quite ask. Sometimes, and very briefly, it solidified into a clear image, and she could see the words, but her mouth couldn't form the shapes, and her throat couldn't form the sounds. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it faded again, and she was alone. Hers was a confined space, a closed world. Even the stars seemed to have deserted her. The sky was always an endless, cloudless black. The lack of hunger puzzled her, as did the desire for, but the lack of needed sleep. She seemed to recall enjoying sleeping and eating, but she could not recall the last time she had done either. She also had a vague recollection of intimacy, and that seemed to fire a connection to this place. Hands and lips exploring another's body, passion firing explosions of colour through her mind, throat forming the sounds of ecstasy, slowly being throttled into the realization of a truth grasped too late. Not lustful, loving passion, but hate, delight, control. She struggled, of course she did, but the realization of the truth had come too late for her to really be able to do anything other than die horribly. Only it wasn't horrible. It was just a change of state. One minute she was gasping for air, and the next her body was on the ground and she was standing beside it looking down and being slightly puzzled about the fact that she could now see herself. She had a vague notion that she should be able to place him, but she couldn't. He had walked away a bit too calmly, almost like he'd known what to expect and how to relax. He'd left the alley, something she knew she could not do. The alley had become her world, and she had accepted that. It had its limitations, but it also lacked the general complications of her former life, and she embraced the simplicity far more easily than she would have imagined. And then, one night, she felt a tightening in her throat, as if his hands were around her neck once more. And as she raised her head, she saw him coming into the alley, his arm casually draped around the shoulders of another woman. He didn't have the decency to take her somewhere new. He was returning to the same spot to kill again. The woman didn't even look like her. She was the polar opposite. Oh God, he didn't even have a type, he just killed because he liked it. He probably wasn't even thinking about her as he brought this new woman into the alley. He had probably forgotten about her and the rush killing her had given him. Well, she would give him something to remember her by. He could see a tall blonde woman running down the alley. He could see the body of a vaguely familiar man on the floor. He had just been going in for a kiss, his hand circling her throat when the dark woman had appeared. She'd said nothing, but had simply reached her arm through Blondie into his chest and grabbed his heart until it shattered. And then, she had flown off into the stars just before the sky went black. It was all he had known, for as long as this version of himself had known anything. And that is the final story from the second time. It is available from Lulu. I put the link in the chat box earlier. It's also available from, like I say, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. If you Google it, it's available from lots of other little shops as well. The ebook will be available soon. I really hope you've enjoyed hearing a little bit of the work. It was a joy to write. It always is. If you've read it and enjoyed it, thank you. That's all I really want. If you haven't read it, it would be fantastic if you got hold of a copy. And please let me know what you think. Please leave reviews. It's really useful. But thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed it. I want to say a big thank you to Anne, to whom I dedicated the book. She's always there. She always comes and supports me, whatever I do. And that's really lovely. I'd also like to thank my amazing almost husband, Adrian, without whom I couldn't do it. And a big thank you also to Jonathan and Joe, and to Mum and Dad, and to all of you for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hope the weather's better where you are than it is where I am. Stay safe. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.